Welcome to the Startup Grind.
This is Julia Hartz. This is Kevin Hartz, respectively the president and CEO of Eventbrite, both co-founders. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Colleen, and thanks to Startup Grind for having us.
Now, yeah.
Love the audience. What a great audience.
Now, everyone here probably bought their ticket through Eventbrite today, so I'm assuming that everybody knows what Eventbrite is and how large it is. But just to start, I want to go back to the early days, the startup days of Eventbrite. You guys started the company, was it 2005, 2006? At that time, Kevin, you were a few years into a company called Zoom, which has gone on to continue to be very successful. You founded that company. What made you want to leave Zoom when it was just sort of in its, ascent? What was this opportunity here at Eventbrite? How did you come up with the idea? What was this motivation? And how hard was that to kind of leave your first baby and start a second one?
Great question. So I was the co-founder and CEO of a company called Zoom, and Zoom is a money transfer business competing with Western Union. And in general, I love businesses that are taking on big lumbering incumbents out in the market. Zoom's on file now, so I can't talk that much about it, but we had decided at a certain time frame that maybe I wasn't quite ready for the CEO position at the company, and it was a disappointment for me to have to step back. And it's hard once you're not in that role and you see things being done a certain way. You may or may not disagree with it or not, but it just felt like it was time to go. And it was a really hard, it was obviously a very hard decision to make, but it also gave me kind of the clean slate and the chance to do it again. And that's really the part of the genesis of Eventbrite. The other part, of course, is Renaud and Julia.
Yeah, so I came from a totally different background. I was a television executive at MTV. I had worked on the first season and the first movie of Jackass, and you're welcome, or I'm sorry, and had gone on to FX Networks and really hadn't thought much about tech. I grew up in the Bay Area and yet had missed this whole era, basically. I was in college and then in LA. And so I got to live vicariously through Kevin for 2 years while he worked on Zoom, and listen to him pitch me 86 times with his deck and when you raised the round from Sequoia, and also kind of understand that this industry had something special that the industry I was in just simply didn't have, and that was really velocity. Things move so quickly here, it's really unparalleled by any other industry. And also the sense that there was a meritocracy in tech, that in Silicon Valley, that I think we can kind of Twitter about and say, Twitter like laugh, not tweet, that it helps to know the right people. But in entertainment, it's basically all about who you know, which I found was very nebulous. And here it's about a little bit about who you know, but more about what you've done or what you know that really matters. And so those things kind of lured me up to Silicon Valley, and at the time I was thinking about taking a gig at Current TV, and they offered me no money, and it was a startup at the time, and I knew how long it had taken FX Networks to become a viable cable company, and that was 10 years with a parent company of Fox. And so it seemed like a very, very big challenge, and I was questioning whether or not my heart was in it. And Kevin said, well, this is at least all I can remember. You said, you could take that job and go work on another startup, or you could build a company with me and work for free. And, oh, by the way, let's not raise money. Let's put all of our money into the company. And I was like, why does that? It's the serial entrepreneur who is the eternal optimist makes that sound like a good idea. That's the only thing I can think of at this point. How you convinced me. So.
And I want to talk about, because yes, you're a husband and wife team, and going into this business together, you did make that decision to join him and co-found Eventbrite. What was that like pitching to investors, as this husband and wife team? Was that a positive? Was it a negative?
Well, I think it's even before the investors, there's the reality of whether or not it's going to work or not. And there's been famous husband and wife teams that it's worked out remarkably, and famous husband and wife teams, as in the case of Cisco, where it was kind of a disaster, but yet Cisco became a great company. And like anything, it's a co-founder relationship, and in our case, we had to be extra sensitive about it because there was this extra personal relationship, important aspect about it. So we approached it somewhat cautiously. We had many different chances where we would say, okay, we're not going to ruin the marriage. One of us steps out, or we'd have this kind of plan B if things went poorly. But I also think it was a great exercise in really ensuring that we were the compatible founders. We were very conscientious of it, and when you're working with founders, your fellow founders, that relationship is fundamental, whether it's romantic or not.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we were so sort of cautious about the decisions we made and what kind of modes of operations we would have, and we had this like motto that we would divide and conquer, that we wouldn't work on the same thing at the same time, and it just so happened that we had complementary skills, so that was actually a really easy thing for us to do. But when I overlay that over any co-founding relationship, it's vital to actually be talking about those kinds of things. And so I think in practice of us taking it one step at a time and knowing that, we might have to pull the eject cord if things went south, we were actually able to build a stronger partnership. And the other thing I'll say is that we don't know any different. So I moved up from LA to San Francisco, and we started Eventbrite, got married, and had our first kid all within the first 18 months. So it's not like we had this long marriage and then we decided to work on something together. I think that I understand now, having been married for 6 years, why that would be a challenge. But our sort of relationship, parenthood, everything kind of has developed under being co-founders, which is an interesting reality, but our reality nonetheless.
And real quick, I want to get specific. You said there are times you had to pull the eject cord. Can you tell me, or one of you had to say, I'm going to step away from this and let you handle it. Can you give me a specific time?
Well, it's always when in any kind of founder relationship, when you're too engaged in the same project. So it's always the fact that the divide and conquer is really a true relationship for any founding team. If you look at some of the great founding teams out there, they're really complementary skills and expertise, and when they start to overlap, it's destructive. So if it's us fighting over the mouse over a spreadsheet or on some aspect of the product, that it's a sure formula, and that's where you have to have the faith and confidence in relationship to trust that this person's going to make the right decisions autonomously, and you can trust in that and handle that aspect of the business. And that's really the lesson for your startup, whether you're 2 people or whether you're 200 and beyond, is that you have to give faith and autonomy to your fellow coworkers.
Yeah, we do a lot of deferring to one another, and also, obviously we support and empower each other, and I think that we haven't necessarily had to pull that eject cord. It was our plan B, but we have had times where we've overlapped, and it's not pretty when that happens, and so we have that divide and conquer mentality for a reason. But also I think that as you build a company, as you get out of sort of operating as a 3-person team and it just being the founders, you start to build an organization that has, I think at the end of the day, it's really important for there to be one leader. And so that was another thing that we wanted to make, or at least that I wanted to make very clear to our team, is that we have one CEO, and we're really lucky to have him. And sometimes when you have 2 founders who are, or more, who are operating a company, it can get a little confusing as to who's steering the ship. And there has to be one. It has to end up, in my belief, it has to be one person. So that's really also helped us, because our entire executive staff reports into Kevin. There's no confusion of roles or who's ultimately that one CEO.
Makes sense. And I want to talk about that scaling up, because we're talking about these early days of when there were 2, 3 of you. But let's talk numbers today. How big are you? How big is your staff? Brag a little bit.
Well, we're 220 people, but I would brag that It's on, for our volume and our reach, we're more proud of the fact that it's 220 people and not 500 or 800 people. And that's a fundamental notion of the startup, is that it's get big fast, but not necessarily through hiring 500 people in a year. It's really, how do you build efficiency and scale in an organization? How do you architect an organization that there's just this mass efficiency? And one of the things that always struck me when I had stepped away from Zoom was watching John, the CEO. If you look at the headcount numbers, the numbers stayed almost the same over a few-year time period, yet revenues kept growing and scaling, and that's really what you want to see, is that scale in the business.
And I think that it was mentioned that this summer we had a big milestone, which was that we had processed $1 billion in aggregate in ticket sales. But what was exciting for us was not necessarily, that was a time for us to say, wow, that's a big number. But what was more exciting is that we transacted $600 million alone in just last year. And so to see that growth and that scale is really exciting. And we'll this year I think we'll pass through 100 million tickets transacted on the site. And so, again, like 220 feels very manageable. We still feel like we all sit on the same floor, about this, a little bit bigger than this, and it feels like we're doing something really big with actually not an unwieldy, size team.
One more just quick comment about that point is, I remember we were pitching Sequoia, and we were showing the fact that, like, all the progress we had made with 3 people, and we were at maybe 12 people when they funded us, and Moritz said something to the effect of, well, I anticipate that you'll scale your business at that same rate of, if you've improved the headcount by 4, your business must improve 40-fold. And he was saying it like partially in jest, but partially in really that notion of how do you build this wonderful scaling entity.
And I want to talk about those investor meetings, that raising money, because you said in the very early days it was, we're not going to raise money, we're just going to put all of our own money in it. At what point did you decide we're going to go out and we're going to raise some outside capital? Can you talk to me about that decision?
We decided at the worst point, when things went to hell. At the end of 2008, the markets crashed, and we'd been self-funding this, and a lot of it was that almost like academically and intellectually, we wanted this challenge of bootstrapping the business, and we were all very fascinated with this notion of scaling up the business without a lot of capital. Again, it points to this inefficiency. So almost out of our own desires, we decided to really bootstrap and run the business very leanly, and take no salaries and not spend much. But then, as the market collapsed at the end of 2008, and through we were pretty worried. We won't say terrified, but we were saying, oh shit, like, what do we do now? And nobody would. We couldn't get a term sheet. We got turned down by everybody. And fortunately, some angel investors came in, Michael and Sochi Birch, Jeff Clavier, and others, along with more of our own money, and did that investment.
And so, yeah, that was a hard time to be raising money. Do you think that was a good thing, though? I mean, we've seen a lot of startups in the past couple of years when it's been a little bit more of a frothy time. Was there, battle scars there that are a good thing?
Well, it was almost, there were battle scars, but it was more, of the empathy for our fellow entrepreneurs. There was a set of companies, if you recall, that had raised a lot of money pre-market crash. And so they were coming into the Series B, Series C stages, and it just went nuclear winter. And a lot of companies tanked during that period. And what we had first thought was a curse, that we hadn't raised money, turned out to be this blessing, because we had really hunkered down and we had built this efficient business. And as it turned out, 2009 turned out to be this like massive growth year. And we punctuated that with Roloff and Sequoia Capital funding us at the end of 2009 when nobody was funding companies.
And what was interesting about that experience was we went out and met with everybody at the end of 2009 again. And we had told them at the beginning of 2009 what we were going to do and what we were going to accomplish in 2009, and we actually did accomplish it. And I remember that was the one point that resonated for everybody. It was like this, wow, you actually did what you said you were going to do. And that's what a lot of the investors walked away with when we met with them. And so it felt good to actually, be recognized for something that seemed so obvious to us. And we knew going into it that Sequoia was, we would really like to work with them again. They had funded Zoom. Roelof is on the board of Zoom. And we were fortunate to have, a few options at that point. So it was a totally different picture 12 months later. And we were able to kind of choose who we wanted to work with. And so we got to work with Sequoia, and that was the right choice for us, because truly they have been partners with us through and through, blocking and tackling, consulting with us on so many different matters in regards to operating our business that it actually didn't even matter the money really that they put in or the valuation. It was really that partnership that made the big difference for us.
Yeah, their offer was actually the lowest offer of the term sheets that we did get.
But it was just about the people,
Yeah, it was the trusted relationship. It was the expertise, the chemistry, in what we saw was the value that they'd bring. So, we wanted to partner with them again.
Is there any advice that you'd give to, entrepreneurs that are looking for an investor? Because it's a funny dance, because you need the money, so you don't want to be,
Right.
Beggars can't be choosers, but it sounds like you guys have been very choosy. What's that, balance like?
Well, we all know that most of the time it's very, very, very hard, and there's these few fortunate cases where you work really hard for a long period of time and you catch fire, and then there's a few cases where you just take off right from the beginning, and then you get that you get that world-class problem of having to choose which investor, and you get to be more picky about valuations and so on. But in the vast majority of cases, it's just, if you get an offer, it's typically, take the money right away. And we could be reverting back to one of those periods where, a lot of people talk about the Series A overhang and all those sorts of things. But typically, if, money is what it's often said that if a startup doesn't run out of cash, you'll be successful. And so first and foremost is to get money. But if you have the luxury and can find a really trusted partner, of course, that's a key aspect.
Sounds like a know it when you see it kind of thing. You know it when you feel it. You know when you talk to that person.
It is. It's a personal relationship, but there's also a certain kind of neural pathways worn in certain investors that understand about building companies, and you can see it in looking at the track record of the investor. What have they done before? Are there analogs to your business that can be useful? So it also helps then to bring those investors on if you see some type of parallel with a certain investor, and it certainly helps to go out and seek those investors out and find those introductions to find the right fit for your company. It's rare that investors just kind of fall into your lap.
Now, when you talk about, I want to change a bit and talk about the Eventbrite product.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have grown, obviously, a lot. You talk about these big numbers, 1 billion processed in the year, 100 million tickets sold. What has been the big challenge from a technical perspective, of scaling up that kind of reach?
Well, we look at ourselves as a multi-category e-commerce company, much like an Amazon or eBay. Instead of electronics or diapers or whatever else, all these books and different categories, we have politics and participatory sports, and with mud runs, we have concerts and classes, and so we have this, like ours is we have a wealth of choices and decisions to make, and so in our case, it's making the right decisions of which direction to go. How much do we apply internationally? How much do we apply, impact and investment do we apply towards the long tail versus the largest of events? So ours is a challenge of, we have many different directions to run, and if we spread ourselves too thin or go into a path where there's a lot of friction, that sets us back.
What path right now are you seeing with the most friction that you would like to do more of? Do we need more Eventbrite ticket sales for mud runs? Or it sounds like you guys have the tech sector pretty well covered. I mean, I'm filling out personally Eventbrite, application every week for a different event.
Well, tech was our community was our earliest adopters, and so that's pretty much why that happened, is that we built the product in partnership with tech organizers like the Startup Grind folks, and so I think that has really played a huge part in what kind of product we built and what kind of company we've become. I think one of the challenges remains this interesting notion that Eventbrite is a self-service platform, and we find a lot of delight in that because it scales and there's all sorts of interesting business models that come out of it. But as we get bigger, or really when we were going through the growing pain years, we were sort of like, it was like a planned denial of service attacks on ourselves, because we wouldn't know when really high volume on sales would occur. I'll never forget one day, we were a group of like 25 people, and one of the CSR people stood up and in the bullpen, and kind of looked around and went, Arcade Fire's going on sale in 5 minutes? And we were like, what? And everybody's like, crap. And that was like a hold your breath moment. Is our service actually going to be able to scale to meet the demands of 25,000 people trying to get 2,000 seats in 5 minutes? And we stayed up, but we were all holding our breaths. And so over the past 18 months, 2 years, we've really built this system that can expand and contract on a moment's notice. And that's such a great technological challenge for us that I think we delight in. But it's also hard for us to overcome the perception that we are just a ticketing company, because actually we're a technology company. And so, that doesn't readily translate to people. And so we have to talk about the nitty-gritty to really get people to understand how we're harnessing the power of the best technology to make this, sort of stagnant industry one that's more alive and accessible for everybody.
And last year, you guys launched sort of a hardware product. Speaking of this kind of technology, can you talk a bit about that? How's that been going?
Yeah, our at-the-door product allows you to pull up will call, swipe credit cards, really kind of tie the offline with the online. And the fundamental bet of Eventbrite is that ticketing and registration will move online, and that's a pretty easy bet when you looking back at it. But there's still an enormous amount of transactions that occur day of, and there's this disparate amount of information where you collect money or credit cards or information at the gate or at the door or at the box office, and this is really a mechanism to tie things together. So the picture that's being painted here is Julia talks about the need to expand and contract on demand with high capacity on sales in the online world, or being able to service customers that are going to walk up to the door or be able to pull up will call, or the fact that we're self-service and we're constantly under attack by fraudsters in 170 different countries around the world, or that we've obviously got to make this transition to mobile and successfully integrate with social media and all these different aspects. I would say that we have a high complexity of our business, and then layer in all the categories, the geographies. You can see how this goes from this notion of simple ticketing to a highly complex business, and it's great for me because it's great for us. We love kind of this heterogeneous nature of this complex business, but for our customers, both the buyers and sellers, we want it to be just simple and easy to use, and that's the magic of it, is how do you make this seamless experience to find and discover events as a consumer and buy tickets or purchase at the door, and how do you make it as convenient for the organizer as well.
I see. And any numbers that you can give me on how that device has been going?
We haven't published any numbers on At the Door. We could probably do putting some numbers out. But if you can imagine, it's the fact that the scales via the App Store, a simple download. Right now we're just on iOS tablets on the iPad, but looking at Android, especially as we see a lot of international growth.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to that. And in order to do all this super challenging stuff, you've obviously got to hire very smart, good people. What's that like right now? All anybody's talking about is how difficult it is to hire. And I know, Julia, you're kind of in charge of a lot of that at Eventbrite.
So when we raised that round from Sequoia, that was an inflection point for the company, because we were a group of 30 people and we knew exactly where we wanted to go and who we needed to hire to get there, because we knew a lot about our business. And so at that moment in time, it became clear to me that 30 to 100 felt like a huge change, which sounds so quaint now. But we didn't want to just hire a bunch of people and hope that it went okay. We wanted to really design a company and create layers that made sense, and we wanted a lot of attention and care to be put on how we put together the company and how we hired and what we were hiring towards. And so I decided to just basically focus on people. And I didn't choose to focus on culture because I certainly didn't want to be the one to dictate the culture. I wanted it to be grown from the people, and I thought that if we did that, we could cultivate a culture that would actually be sustainable through hypergrowth. And so I set out to do that at the beginning of 2010, basically, and I've been having a really awesome time. I feel like I have the most kick-ass job in the world, but basically, I think that going back to that whole we're technology company thing, we sit in the center of Silicon Valley. Our community is, and the people that we compete with on a daily basis for hiring are really amazing technology companies. Dropbox, Square, Twitter, Pinterest. So I think one of the things I'm most proud of is that we're neck and neck with them in terms of talent and talent density. And I think that helps us be a better company every day, really, because we are holding ourselves to a certain standard that's pretty phenomenal. And yet we can still be a community. We're very open and collaborative with those companies, but it's competitive. And so we really had to understand what it takes for us to stand out among those amazing transformative technologies. And one way is to really kind of turn what we're doing inside out, right? And so Eventbrite is a pretty humble company. I'd say we've kind of had to overcome that in a way. So we don't talk a lot about what we do, but when we do actually, reveal what's going on underneath the hood, it's an exciting proposition for technologists and everyone else, really.
What's your favorite thing to reveal if you're selling that to someone?
Well, one of the things that we love is the frauds, is that huge fraud problem, because when you have a very open system, it's just a total invitation, to fraudsters around the world to come bang on your system and try every which way to steal money, really, through your system. And so we love the fact that we've been thinking about this problem for years. We actually have a whole data science team that is thinking about this intelligently without making it a frictionful experience for users, right? So that's one of the big problems that we're solving. So for us, it's really about being able to show people what we're actually doing, but also it's about the culture. I mean, I think when you walk into Eventbrite, you have a certain feeling, that's palatable and it's tangible, and that wasn't grown overnight. That's taken, 3 years of us thinking this through, and again, carefully layering on these aspects of our culture. And so, I'm excited for all the challenges ahead. I actually think that as we have density of talent, you start to feel a little bit like you're on an island and there's sharks circling. So that was a phenomenon that I felt sort of mid-year last year when people start identifying, oh wait, Eventbrite has a lot of really smart people. Let's start poaching from them. And that just makes it that much more challenging and, to me, fun to really make sure that we're building the right company that people want to stay at. Because I'm not going to run around doing counteroffers all day. I mean, people have to want to stay at Eventbrite, and our retention's been pretty amazing. So it's still very much a work in progress, though.
Cool. And I want to ask, for one of my last questions here, I want to get negative for a second. What is the worst piece of advice that you guys received along the way, or maybe that you see other entrepreneurs receiving all the time, something that's seen as a tenet of good advice, but is actually terrible?
To believe your own hype. or to like ride the wave of the hype. I just think that we've been around for 7 years. I told Colleen, you should ask us why we've been, like why it's taken us so long. I think that you can get distracted by so many different opportunities, and what I've learned is that, for us, it's been a really nice steady climb, but for others, it hasn't been so steady, right? It's a huge pop, and you have so many opportunities to make the wrong decision when things are going right. It's the weirdest thing, and it's almost like all these temptations and distractions present themselves to you, and through success, you have so many opportunities to fail, and so I feel like maybe, I don't know if it's advice, but I feel like many entrepreneurs fall into these common pitfalls when they have these really big overnight successes, and they start to kind of believe their own hype, and then as they're sort of smiling and waving their hands, everything's falling down behind them.
Yeah, I would add to that or complement that with that there is a myriad of advice. It's important to surround yourself by good advisors, by great investors, just people that you respect. You're always going to receive a lot of great advice. You're going to receive a lot of bad advice, but at the end, the decision's on your shoulders, and you make those decisions, and it's a series of good decisions over time that get you along the way, to success. So, I think a company finds its own rhythm, and over time, you also find the people that the mentors that resonate the most and give the best advice.
Great. And last question here. Along the lines of what's taken you guys so long, IPO has been something that people have talked about a lot in recent months. So I guess in the past now year or so with Eventbrite. Is that in the cards still? Is an IPO something that you're looking toward?
We absolutely want to be a standalone company. So we're in this for the long term. I think it always takes longer than one anticipates. We're more excited than ever about the company. Can't give a date or anything to that extent.
And I thought we'd break news here. I thought you were going to give me the date.
I misled Colleen before. I was like, hey, go ahead and ask the IPO question, and I'll dodge it again.
Yeah, well, you did it very well.
Thank you.
But great. Well, Julia and Kevin, thank you for being here. We're about out of time, and everyone is probably going to come up and ask questions afterwards. So thank you so much
Thanks
for
so much.
talking.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure. Thanks, everyone.